How significant then is this gathering of leaders that Joe Biden is putting together? The skeptics might point to a talking shop. What are the kind of tangible outcomes that could emanate from these conversations over the next 2 days?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I think we can already point to a number of tangible outcomes that have resulted from this summit, which President Biden planned less than 100 days into office, which is obviously a very, very ambitious move. The fact that John Kerry traveled to China, the first representative from the United States to do so under the Biden administration on the issue of climate change, I think is a huge signal of the seriousness with which the U.S. treats the relationship with China. And I think we have a real opportunity for, as you noted, collaboration, but also healthy competition between the U.S. and China to really drive down emissions.
And Aimee, we talked about the fact that to some extent the US has to regain trust internationally when it comes to its climate pledges. And we're expecting that Joe Biden could come out and commit to a 50% reduction by 2030. The realities are that we're not sure that that is even achievable, particularly when you have, 50% of senators in the US who are opposed to anything meaningful in terms of tackling the climate crisis. How can the US really convince then its international partners that concrete action will take place in the US that will go a long way to meeting these goals?
Absolutely. I think the U.S. certainly has a reputational issue to address with the damage that the Trump administration inflicted over the last 4 years on both our international climate leadership and our climate policies at home. So I think that is a real serious issue. I think, as you mentioned, we also do anticipate that President Biden will announce a very ambitious update to the initial Paris commitment that was made of reductions of 26 to 28% by 2025 under the Paris Agreement. We don't know the numbers yet. Anticipate those will be released tomorrow on the first day of the Climate Leaders Summit. But that, as you noted, those are likely to be somewhere in the range of 50% emission reductions by 2030, which is a significant undertaking. Now, can the U.S. meet that goal? There are very strong indications, modeling that's been done by a number of academic groups and other firms that indicate that target is achievable. Certainly, U.S. Congress will be needed to step in and support in some regards, and we see the president pushing very hard on the American Jobs Plan that will hopefully provide funding for much of the green transition that needs to happen. But at the same time, we know that this transition is really unstoppable and underway. We saw it over the past 4 years. Governors, mayors from all over the country stepping up to fill the leadership void that was created by the Trump administration, businesses, investors, civil society doubling down on their commitments through the We Are Still In platform, and we expect that to continue. So while the U.S. certainly has an uphill climb, I think it has a lot of support from across the country and is really in an important way centering climate action at the core of economic recovery.
Aimee, David here, and because you mentioned it too, and we have this graphic, guys, can we show that again on the emissions here? I mean, obviously we need to be, we need to be hopeful, we need to be ideal, but we also need to be realistic. And this graphic essentially shows where current policy is and where it needs to be really by 2030 to achieve some of these targets. What I'm trying to get to is, yes, it's a tall ask, but is it too late to start meeting these 2030 targets? Do we need to move the goalposts as soon as now?
Well, I think there's no moving the goalpost. I mean, the climate requires that we set and achieve these ambitious targets. We've already experienced 1 degree of warming. If you look at the climate impacts that are already happening across the United States as well as China, wildfire season has already begun across the American West. We've seen incredible damage and loss of life from storms across the American Southeast. Obviously in China, drought and pollution associated with climate is causing loss of life, shortening of life. And we'll continue to do that for millions and millions of people over the coming decade if we don't act. So really not acting is not an option, and reducing ambition is not an option. And, from my own personal experience, I formerly served as a senior advisor to California Governor Jerry Brown. We always hear concerns when we set ambitious targets like this about their achievability. When we set a goal to return emissions to 1990 levels by 2020, people said it wouldn't be done, it would kill the economy, and we met that goal 4 years early. The state also is, well on its way to meeting its renewable energy targets ahead of time. So this is an industry that is unstoppable. It's an issue that has a moral imperative that is absolute. And so I think that these targets are right on.
And let's bring in China. How then does China come in and help, if any?
Well, I don't think it's a question about how China helps. I think, China and the U.S. are both, the two major economies and the major emitters of carbon pollution in the world. And so this really has to be a partnership amongst equals on this issue. And I think China has already made a really important step, setting a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions to net zero levels by 2060. That's, as you mentioned, shortly about 10 years after the current U.S. goal that was set by President Biden under executive order. The U.S. and China last week, during conversations between Minister Xie and Special Envoy Kerry, discussed a number of areas for cooperation, including encouraging other countries to increase their ambition, reducing emissions from methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas pollutant, many more times powerful than carbon dioxide. Also, China recommitting to address emissions from HFCs and CFCs, which are refrigerant gases that have global warming power, in some cases thousands and tens of thousands of times the strength of carbon. And so, I think China is, on the one hand, really stepping up, but also, like the U.S., has a ways to go.